Okay, picture this. You're just reviewing some video footage. It's a drag because you never find anything, but you need to do it because it's part of your job. Industrial food plants are loud with conveyor belts rattling, metal hums, compressed air hissing somewhere in the background. So at first glance, the footage almost looks ordinary. Stainless steel, machinery, workers moving around, production lines. And then the camera angle shifts and you feel alarmed because a man standing over a conveyor belt at your Kellogg company plant in Memphis unzips his pants and urinates directly onto the production line. You hold back a gag and make a few calls. The first call is to your partner. You tell them you're going to be late tonight. The second call is your supervisor, and the third call is to the authorities. Hey, hello, and welcome to another episode of True Crime Culinary, the show where we embrace the intersection of food, history, psychology, and the little details you secretly wonder about. I'm your host, Leah. Hey, before kicking off this week's episode, I wanted to say thank you for all the new followers and the comments. I'm so very pleased you are here. Enough of that, back to biz. I can't remember what I was doing, but all of a sudden I was like, where do Rice Krispies come from? I ate them a ton as a kid. I'm one of those people who likes to mix 3 to 5 different cereals in the same bowl. You may choose to unfollow me because of this revelation, but I think it's the best way to eat cereal. You never know what you're going to bite. You have a way of hiding the concrete grade grape nuts you need to use up, and you have the most optimized ratio of cereal to milk. But again, that got me thinking, how do Rice Krispies even make those sounds? So let's get to snap, crack, and poppin' and spoon our way through this crazy history. First things first, I did not know the name of Rice Krispies is literal. That's right, my friends. Rice Krispies are in fact puffed rice. More specifically, the rice is cooked, dried, pressurized, and heated until moisture trapped inside rapidly expands. You might think that sounds vaguely similar to popcorn, which if you want to know more about popcorn, head to episode 3, The Stalker in the Stalks, and you can learn all about it. It's super cool. But instead of exploding dramatically like popcorn, the rice puffs into really small, crisp pieces that can survive being drowned by milk for at least a few minutes before surrendering completely. So yeah, it's literally crispy rice. But I was still like, okay, but why is it crispy? Like, who is like, I see rice, I will make you crispy? And that's where we have to go back into time to one of the stranger chapters of American history, sanatoriums. What is a sanatorium, you ask? It is kind of like a wellness retreat and a hospital had a baby. They were kind of all the rage when tuberculosis was a problem, but they treated a ton of things. A really famous one is Battle Creek, which I kind of want to point out, a little bit of a marketing error. Not the greatest name for somewhere you should recover. But in the late 1800s, Battle Creek became heavily associated with health reform movements. Wealthy Americans traveled there for treatments involving controlled diets, exercise routines, fresh air, hydrotherapy, enemas, electric light therapy, and enough digestive discussion to make modern wellness influencers look restrained. And at the center of this was John Harvey Kellogg. Kellogg was a physician and superintendent at Battle Creek Sanatorium, where he promoted what he called biologic living. He believed many illnesses came from improper diet, overstimulation, inactivity, and digestive problems. Oh yeah, for the record, Battle Creek is in Michigan. In addition to his passion for poop management, he really didn't like people experiencing plaisir. And when I say plaisir, I mean the old carnal pleasure. It was a real concern for him. Kellogg believed the cure for that was like bland diets to reduce sexual urges, including masturbation, which many health reformers of the era viewed as physically damaging. And to that I say, bruh. So when I was looking up Kellogg, a lot of times you'd see something like, cornflakes were invented solely to stop masturbation. But it was kind of a more contextualized vibe of like trying to control your urges alongside improving your health, etc., etc. But again, our buddy Kellogg, he was really focused on digestion. He had a real passion for the old intestines. So at the sanatorium, patients ate highly controlled vegetarian meals that emphasized nuts, grains, and relatively bland foods. Heavy breakfasts common at the time, like meats, fried foods, leftovers, beer in some historical periods, were increasingly criticized by reformers who believed simpler meals were healthier. Sure, healthier, but like a whole lot less fun. Which brings us to the flakes. According to the popular origin story, cooked grain dough was accidentally left sitting out too long before being rolled, and instead of producing a smooth sheet, it broke into flakes, which they then toasted. And this is where I had a minor bit of smoke come out of my ears, because I never really thought about where cornflakes come from, or that again, their name tells us exactly what they are. In fact, you can make these at home. I went to the Tube of You and found you could basically grind up corn and then make it more or less into these flakes by baking them. Again, there's way more steps to that, but it's actually very doable. And voila, you have your own cereal. I can't explain what I thought they were, but there you go. Now I know that Rice Krispies, fried rice, sort of. Cornflakes, flakes of actual corn. Okay. Back to Battle Creek, they said milk yes to the flakes. So while John Harvey Kellogg was focused on health reform, his brother, Will Keith Kellogg, who we will call WK, saw commercial opportunity. His eyes went ka-ching. That created some tension between the brothers almost immediately, because John wanted the sanatorium and a healthy bowel, whereas WK kind of wanted to mass market cereal. Meanwhile, another future cereal titan was already paying attention. C.W. Post arrived in Battle Creek as a patient. Post had struggled with chronic illness, stress, insomnia, and what was commonly diagnosed at the time as nervous exhaustion. I have to say, reading those symptoms through a modern lens, it's kind of easy to see why some historians think Post may have been struggling with depression, but it's really hard to diagnose somebody 100 years later. So while John Harvey Kellogg became the famous doctor behind the Battle Creek Sanatorium, it was actually his younger brother, W.K. Kellogg, who saw the commercial potential of cereal. The brothers fought for years over the direction of the business. WK wanted to add sugar and sell cereal to the masses. John thought it should remain a health food. The dispute became so bitter, they spent years in court, stopped talking, and effectively split the cereal empire into two. WK eventually built Kellogg into one of the largest cereal companies in the world, while John actually remained focused on medicine and the sanatorium. And overall, whether the sanatorium actually cured people is like debatable, but Post noticed something important while he was there. People were willing to spend serious money on packaged health foods. So after leaving Battle Creek, Post launched his own products, including Postum and later Grape Nuts. And this helped ignite what became the early cereal wars. Also, as an FYI, Grape Nuts are not actually nuts of the old vine-ripened grape. It's wheat and malted barley. I had to look it up because I was like, this cannot be true. And this next part's a little bit of a bummer. C.W. Post built a cereal empire that rivaled Kellogg's, but he struggled with chronic illness and declining health throughout his life. And in 1914, at the age of 59, after years of pain and health complications following an appendectomy, he actually died by suicide. His company survived him and eventually became one of the biggest names in packaged foods, but he actually never really got to see that enormous success. However, next time you have some cornflakes, think of our guy, C.W. Post. Regardless, Battle Creek turned into the cereal capital of America. Multiple cereal companies emerged from the area. Grain processing improved, packaging improved, advertising exploded, and breakfast itself started changing. Because before cereal, breakfasts were often heavier and hotter. Porridges, breads, eggs, meats, leftovers, as I mentioned. But cereal offered something a little bit different. It was fast, it was shelf stable, you could pour it in a bowl, add milk, done. But you can kind of see how, even though cereal spread internationally, the United States definitely has a death grip on cereal, whereas other parts of the world really eat a variety of other foods. And then things got a little sweeter. Early cereals had largely been marketed around digestion and health, but as competition increased, companies leaned harder into flavor, mascots, prizes, advertising campaigns, and yes, children. I mean, in terms of mascots, you do have a few to choose from. Just to get you going, you could choose from a big-ass cat named Tony, who is a tiger. You could go for a seafaring gentleman like Captain Crunch, a feathered friend like Toucan Sam, or one of the names I can only hear Robin Williams say in my head, Camp Chocula, bro. I think it was from like his Broadway show. Oh my God, I could watch that over and over and over again. But we get back to Rice Krispies. They launched in 1928. And unlike earlier cereals that mainly sold themselves as health claims, Rice Krispies had something else, an auditory accoutrement, specifically snap, crackle, and pop. The cereal literally made noise when milk hit it. Snap, Crackle, and Pop, the mascots were developed, like they got their names because of the onomatopoeia, meaning the sound they make is the name they were called. And they actually first came on the scene in 1933. Originally, they were kind of drawn as like elfy gnomes, and then over time, they kind of morphed into like basically young boys, and became one of the most recognizable food marketing campaigns in America. Most foods advertise flavor or convenience, but Rice Krispies kind of leaned into the acoustics. Where doth the acoustics come from, you ask? And I'm very excited to tell you. The acoustics are from the tension of the milk going through the little air pockets of the puffed rice, basically as like the little super thin walls of puffed rice break and the milk goes through. And I have to say, that is so cool, and I love science. But wait, there's more. Rice Krispies did become a sugary delight with the aid of marshmallows. In case you want to know about marshmallows, episode 6, The Marshmallow Trap, Molds, Myths, and Marketing. It's a very funny one and involves Egyptians. Anyway, Rice Krispie Treats. You may wonder where they come from. The classic version is butter, marshmallow, and cereal pressed into bars. It usually is actually credited to Mildred Day and other Kellogg home economists from the late 1930s. And this is one of my favorite parts of the story because it feels so normal now that they're around, and it's kind of easy to forget that someone had to come up with them. At the time, marshmallows were becoming more industrialized and commercially accessible, and Kellogg employees were developing recipes to promote cereal usage beyond breakfast bowls. The treats had a few advantages. They were super cheap, they were very portable, they were easy to make, meaning that they were very accessible from a number of different cooking skills. Because remember, we didn't have like YouTube and TikTok and a ton of magazines. A lot of these skills were passed down, or you had to learn it from somebody that you knew directly. So if something was easy to put on a box or something easy to write down, and there was like very low chances that someone would mess up, it was a really good opportunity to kind of get something into a lot of homes. The other thing is that Rice Krispies treats are very scalable, which made them super perfect for all kinds of fundraisers, such as school fundraisers, bake sales, church gatherings, and community events, or for late night snacking. In fact, Rice Krispies Treats might be one of the more successful accidental fundraising foods ever created. I don't know how we'll prove that, but I like the sentiment nonetheless. And I feel like when I was thinking of other things that are really easy for fundraisers, sure, chocolate chip cookies, love that for us. But in terms of like, you really only have to like melt one or two things, stir them together, let them cool, and then nosh. Maybe the Chex Mix, I forgot what it's called, where it's like you put butter and chocolate and peanut butter, and like I cannot control myself around that stuff. But that's probably the only other one I could see as being as easy. Arguably, Rice Krispies treats still dominate. And then zip to like 100 years later, the same cereal eventually became connected to a federal food tampering investigation. Back to our friends at the Memphis plant. After being seen in the video, the Memphis plant worker involved in the urination scandal ultimately received a prison sentence connected to consumer product tampering charges. But the story stuck around online because it collided with something a little bit bigger, mainly trust. Because industrial food requires an enormous amount of trust. Most of us never see factories, we never meet the workers, we never match the production lines. May I just say a massive thank you to all your hard work. We as consumers often can just benefit from focusing on the commercials, the mascots, and assume that the box is close to perfect. But in this case, the trust arguably quite violated. And thus I am also left with only one final question. Do you think there was a snap, crackle, and pop when the pea hit the conveyor belt? Okay, on that note, thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. See you next week. Until next time, stay curious and be careful what's in your cup. Check out our show notes for sources, hit that subscribe button, rate and review the podcast anywhere you listen.